They say love hurts, but sometimes it kills. A Lonely Hearts Killer, or Want-Ad Killer, is a person who lures their victim in by placing or responding to advertisements in newspapers or on the internet. These ads are typically of the romantic variety, with the killer's targets usually being those looking for love or offering erotic services. This is a collection of profiles detailing the exploits of a handful of these killers. Philip Haynes Markoff had a promising life ahead of him. He was a second-year medical student at Boston University, and he had a fiancée, Megan. He was believed to be, by his friends' family and the general community at large, to be a model citizen. However, there was a much darker side to this ambitious young man who would go on a 7-day crime spree in April 2009, targeting several women in the process. Philip made use of the site Craigslist to contact his victims, browsing ads placed by women offering erotic services. He would respond to the ads, agree on a price for a massage or other similarly worded service, and go to the hotel room that the girl was staying at so that they could be alone. As soon as the door to the hotel room was closed, he would pull out a gun that he had brought with him. Craigslist made it extremely quick and easy for a predator like him to select a target for the evening, and the site became Philip's prowling ground. For this reason, the media would later go on to dub him the Craigslist Killer. He didn't start out as a killer though, and, to begin with, was interested in robbing his victims, who he knew would be handling a lot of cash due to the services they provided. It's also believed that Philip got a sexual kick out of committing these crimes. His first victim was escort Tricia Leffler, who was bound and gagged as he robbed her at her hotel in Boston. After he left, Tricia quickly freed herself and contacted the police. There was CCTV footage of Philip leaving the scene of the crime. Only 4 days later, the police returned to talk to Tricia with a new set of CCTV images from a different hotel in Boston. They asked her if she could identify the man in the footage as the man who robbed her. She could. The images were taken just before he met his second victim, and just as he left the scene of the crime. However, this girl, Jalissa Brisman, was not as fortunate as Tricia. Again, Philip had set up a web date on Craigslist and went to meet Jalissa with a gun and zip ties in his pocket. Upon arriving, he closed the door behind him, withdrew his weapon, and began to tie her hands together with the zip ties. What he didn't anticipate, however, was Jalissa's no-nonsense attitude when it came to being robbed. She fought back, and as a result, Philip shot her point blank in front of the door. She slumped forwards and onto the floor. Despite his academic successes, Philip was far from a criminal mastermind, and left Jalissa's body sticking halfway out of her hotel room as he fled the scene. Because of this, the 25-year-old's body was discovered mere moments after she was fatally wounded. Only 2 days after Jalissa's murder, Philip struck again for the last time. He attempted to rob an erotic dancer called Corrine Stout, who he had again met on Craigslist. Unfortunately for Philip, police were soon able to locate where he lived after uncovering his IP address found from emails that he had sent to Jalissa. The gun that was used to kill her was found in his apartment, hidden in a hollowed-out copy of a Gray's Anatomy book. Philip committed suicide prior to his trial, exactly 1 year and 1 day after the date his wedding was supposed to be held. His fiancée's name, Megan, was written on his cell wall in his own blood. He bled out after severing multiple arteries and tightening a plastic bag over his head. With the coming of the internet, finding unsuspecting victims has become a lot simpler for want-ad killers, putting them in touch with millions of potential targets. But these types of crimes date back much further than that. Born in 1859, Belle Gunness was a Norwegian-American serial killer who moved to the USA in 1881. She is believed to be responsible for the murder of 40 people, though some estimate the number may be even more than that. A woman of intimidating size, she stood at 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds. Belle had numerous husbands over the course of her life, and numerous children with them. But one thing she loved more than her family was what they were worth. Prior to placing any form of advertisement in a Lonely Hearts column, there were a suspicious amount of deaths occurring around Belle to the people who were closest to her. In 1884, 2 of the 4 children she had with her first husband, Mads, mysteriously died. The cause of death was supposedly acute colitis. In 1884, 2 of the 4 children she had with her first husband, Mads, died. The cause of death was supposedly acute colitis, though the symptoms of the disease were strikingly similar to the most common types of poisoning. Adding to the suspicion was the fact that both of their lives were insured. This, of course, may have only been a coincidence, but in 1900, Mads also died suddenly, on the same day in which 2 life insurance policies on him overlapped. With the money she gained from Mads's life insurance payout, she moved to Indiana, where she married Peter Gunness, another Norwegian-born American, in 1902. Only 1 week after their wedding, Peter's infant daughter died while alone in the house with Belle. The cause of her death was uncertain. Later that year, Peter also passed away after a quote-unquote tragic accident after a sausage grinding machine fell on his head. Though a coroner ruled his death as murder, Belle was able to convince authorities that she was innocent of any foul play. There was certainly a lot of death surrounding Belle, and a lot of money entering her pockets. It wasn't enough for her liking, however, and in 1907, she began to place want ads in the Lonely Hearts section of a newspaper, in which she stated that she was looking for an equally wealthy suitor with whom she could join fortunes. When they came to visit, she would ask them to bring money with them to help her pay off her mortgage. Many men responded to her ads, though only one would ever survive staying at her farm. That lucky man was George Anderson, who could intuitively tell that Belle intended to murder him when he woke up in the middle of the night to her standing over him, holding a candle and staring at him, with death in her eyes. He immediately fled the farmhouse and never returned for the possessions he left behind. All of the others weren't so lucky as to see through Belle's charade. Those who arrived would disappear within a matter of days after arriving at the farm, despite the fact that Belle would constantly be depositing large sums of money into her savings account. Other farmers in the area noticed that Belle would dig holes in the hog pen on her farm late at night, and would order the delivery of large storage trunks to her address. After paying off her mortgage, the farm mysteriously burned down. Inside the house were 4 bodies. 3 were Belle's children. The 4th was presumed to be Belle herself, though this couldn't be confirmed, since the body had no head. Belle's former farmhand, Ray Lamphere, was arrested for their murder and for arson. However, neighbors pointed out that the decapitated woman didn't seem to match the distinctive body shape of Belle, who was much taller than the charred corpse, and generally much larger. After examining her property, Belle's murders were unearthed, literally, as the area around her hog pen was dug up after family members of the missing suitors arrived to the farm, concerned for the safety of their fathers and brothers. It was then, in 1908, that the bodies of dozens of men who had responded to Belle's advertisements were discovered. The body of Belle's foster daughter, who she said was at boarding school, was also uncovered. along with 2 unidentified children. It remains unclear as to who the decapitated body belonged to, as the head was never found, though a set of teeth were, which did not match with Bell's dental records. Bell was never heard from again after the burning down of her farm, though there were reportedly many sightings of her for the next 20 years across different states. For her disturbing actions, she is often thought of as a female Bluebeard, and has become a part of American criminal folklore. She wrote to many of her potential suitors, "Come prepared to stay forever." She wasn't lying. Another female serial killer who made use of want ads to lure in her victims was Nanny Doss, sometimes referred to as the Lonely Hearts Killer or the Giggling Granny. Her friends and neighbours thought of her as a friendly and jolly woman, which makes it all the more frightening that she would go on to kill 11 people between the 1920s and 1954. Like many serial killers, she had an unhappy childhood due to her extremely controlling father and the fact that she was molested by a string of men in her early teens. Alongside this, a head injury at the age of 7 caused a shift in Nanny's mental stability. When she was 16, she married her first husband, Charles Braggs, with whom she had 4 children. Their marriage, however, was an unhappy one, with both partners being unfaithful. 2 of their daughters died unexpectedly only a few months apart, leading Charles to become suspicious of his wife, since both children appeared to be completely healthy in his eyes, and the insurance payouts did little to ease his mind. They divorced, with Charles stating that he left her out of fear. After the collapse of her first marriage, Nanny turned to a Lonely Hearts column and began writing to men who were advertising there. It was through this that she met her second husband, Frank. This marriage, too, was an unhappy one, and after a particularly nasty incident that occurred when Frank came home drunk after celebrating the end of World War II, Nanny decided that she had had enough of him. She laced his whiskey with rat poison, and Frank died later that night. It was also around this time that one of Nanny's own grandchildren perished, with Nanny's own daughter remaining adamant that she saw her stick a hatpin into the baby's head. Years later, another one of her grandchildren also met their end whilst being babysat by her. The child's death was ruled as asphyxia due to unknown causes, and only a couple of months later, Nanny collected $500 in life insurance that she had taken out on her grandchild. Nanny, again, turned to the Lonely Hearts column to find her third husband, Arlie Lanning, who would go on to die suddenly from heart failure, quickly followed by Lanning's own mother, who died in her sleep. After their joint house mysteriously burned to the ground, Nanny took the insurance and moved in with her sister, Dovey, who, you guessed it, mysteriously died soon after Nanny's arrival. It seemed like wherever Nanny went, death soon followed, and that trend continued on when Nanny's fourth husband, Richard, was poisoned to death, along with Nanny's own mother, who had come to stay with them. She married one final time to a man called Samuel Doss in 1953. Only months after they were wed, Samuel came down with flu-like symptoms and was rushed to the hospital. Nanny's attempts to poison her fifth husband had proven unsuccessful, which she found worrying, as she was in a rush to collect on 2 life insurance policies that she had taken out on him. On the day of his release from hospital, Samuel died suddenly. Obviously, the fact that he died on the same day that he was released from the hospital was extremely suspicious, and an autopsy was ordered. Inside his system was a huge amount of arsenic. Nanny was promptly arrested for his murder, and was later convicted for the murder of her other victims as well. She was sentenced to life imprisonment and died of leukemia in 1965. Despite prospering financially from her crimes, Nanny maintained that she was motivated by love rather than money. "I was searching for the perfect mate," she said, "the real romance of life." Now, from the Lonely Hearts Killer to the Lonely Hearts Killers, or as they're also known, the Honeymoon Killers, Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck. Raymond was a strange individual who believed he had the ability to turn women into his sexual slaves by using voodoo, which he had been learning about from a cellmate while serving time for petty theft. Before uniting with his future partner in crime, Martha Beck, Raymond worked alone. He would scour the Lonely Hearts section of newspapers, pick out the most vulnerable, lonely, and usually oldest women he could find, and engage in a relationship with them. After gaining their trust, he would empty their bank accounts and steal their possessions. This being the 1940s, the majority of his victims were too embarrassed to report their crimes. This was evil enough on his part, but at least at this point, Raymond had never killed any of his targets. That was until he met Martha Beck in 1947, after answering a personal ad that she had posted. Martha was a single mother of two who fantasized about romance and being swept off her feet. After meeting Raymond, she became enamored with him, and almost immediately moved to New York to live with him, abandoning her 2 children in the process. Raymond confessed his crimes to Martha, and took her under his wing. The duo began conning women out of their savings together, with Martha posing as Raymond's sister as he gained their affections. As time went by, Martha became more and more jealous of the attention that Raymond would pay to their victims as he wooed them out of their house and home. When he began to have sex with these women, she became unstable. The first woman that Martha caught Raymond in bed with was 66-year-old Janet Fay. Martha smashed her head in with a hammer. The pair would also go on to kill a young widow and her 2-year-old daughter that they were staying with in Michigan after fleeing New York. They buried their bodies in the basement of their own home. When the police discovered the makeshift tomb, the pair confessed to their crimes, believing they would be given life sentences since Michigan was a non-capital punishment state. Unfortunately for them, they were actually extradited back to New York, where they were both sentenced to death. They pleaded to be spared on the basis of insanity, but failed to convince the jury. The couple were executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison on the 8th of March 1951. Both of their final words professed their love for the other. In total, they are believed to have murdered as many as 20 women. Their depraved story has become the subject of numerous films. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and join the Lazy Legion for more videos like this. And don't forget to check out Anthony's artwork by following the links in the description below. Stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.